When it rains, it pours. Hello, my fam. It is Perez, the queen of all media, the original influencer, and your number one source for everything It Ends With Us saga. We have just had our most eventful day in weeks. Not only did we get all the drama between Black Lives Matter and Baldoni's team over her refusal to hand over her medical records, which his team says they need, is important to have those medical records to fight her claims of infliction of emotional distress. And Baldoni, the Wayfarer parties, allege that having that information shared and receiving that is common in lawsuits where that allegation is made. Watch my previous videos from today to be fully caught up on that. But in addition to that, the lawyers were working overtime today for Team Baha'i Faith. Remember, last month I told you all that the Sisterhood of the Traveling Plantation alum was seeking Rule 11 sanctions against several of the Baldoni Wayfarer parties. Sanctions under Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 11, Rule 11, are penalties imposed on attorneys or parties who file pleadings, motions, or other court documents that violate the rule's requirements. These requirements include ensuring that filings are well grounded in law and fact and that they are not filed for improper purpose. Blake Lively's team has alleged that the Baldoni parties were filing all of these motions to clog up the court docket, to delay things, and to unnecessarily make her spend more money. Well, now, in this new filed letter to the court, we are hearing their response to this request for sanctions. And this is juicy. Oh, I love when they get snarky. They say Blake Lively's Rule 11 motion seeks sanctions against individual Wayfarer parties Jamie Heath, Steve Sarowitz, Melissa Nathan, Jennifer Abel, and It Ends With Us Movie LLC and their counsel. Ironically, the motion itself borders on frivolous as it contravenes Rule 11's 1993 Advisory Committee notes and unanimous authority governing Rule 11 sanctions, which teach that Rule 11 motions should not be employed as a discovery device or to test the legal sufficiency or efficacy of allegations in the pleadings. Other motions are available for those purposes. Thus, Rule 11 should not be confused with a Rule 12b-6 motion to dismiss for failure to state a claim for relief, and a Rule 11 motion based on a deficiency in the pleadings is improper, particularly where, as here, it is based on arguments substantially identical to those made in support of a motion to dismiss for failure to state a claim, which they did in their motion to dismiss. Lively's motion is cynically silent on this point, even though it was conveyed to Lively in plaintiff's response to Lively's Rule 11 safe harbor letters. Lively similarly fails to note that she has filed a Rule 12b-6 motion to dismiss, raising pleading defects that are substantially the same as those that are at the heart of her Rule 11 motion. Any other pleading defects now raised by the motion are more properly raised in a motion to dismiss. Rule 11 is not a vehicle to challenge pleading deficiencies that are or should be the subject of a Rule 12b-6 motion to dismiss or an avenue to obtain an early determination on the merits. Translation: she already filed her motion to be dismissed. This is just unnecessary. And not only is it unnecessary, it's circumventing the normal process. I was thinking process, but said procedure. Such a motion, like the one here, is on the borderline of being sanctionable itself. Then they cite a case and law. In fact, given the plain import of the advisory notes and relevant case law, Lively's motion is nothing more than a transparent effort to tarnish the wayfarer parties and their counsel in the eyes of the court and the press. Exactly the type of conduct that Rule 11 is designed to discourage. As shown below, the advisory notes to Rule 11 and relevant authority preclude Lively's request for sanctions. So now they really get into the minutia of things, and they remind and introduce into the court that her request for sanctions also claimed that the Baldoni parties failed to adequately plead their claims for extortion, interference with contract, prospective economic relations, and breach of the implied covenant of good faith and fair dealings. That's why those parties, and not Justin Baldoni himself, are mentioned in the request for sanctions. Because Justin Baldoni himself did have a contract that he claims was interfered, and that he also did have a contract with her, not just the contract with the talent agency. They're also telling the judge, we tried to explain this all to them, but no, they filed this request for sanctions, wasting your time. And in today's letter, the Baldoni Wayfarer parties also argue that Team Delulu wants to punish them not just for any motions they filed, but also for things said in the press. Quote, although less than fully obvious, Lively appears to seek Rule 11 sanctions against plaintiffs and counsel based on allegedly harassing statements to the press. Seeking Rule 11 sanctions to deter plaintiffs' counsel and the Rule 11 plaintiffs from continuing to unlawfully harass Miss Lively with baseless accusations and statements to the press, read her request for sanctions. As Lively herself explains, the central purpose of, as they themselves explain, okay? You so dumb, you forgot you brought this up yourselves. As Lively herself explains, the central purpose of Rule 11 is to deter baseless filings in district court. Thus, Rule 11 sanctions are not available for out-of-court statements, but are confined to court filings. For the reasons set forth above and their abject failure to bring relevant authority to the court's attention, Lively and her counsel should be sanctioned in an... Oh, what a reversal! For the reasons set forth above and their abject failure to bring relevant authority to the court's attention, Lively and her counsel should be sanctioned in an amount sufficient to compensate plaintiffs for the time and resources expended in responding to Lively's meritless Rule 11 motion and deter any further misuse of Rule 11. Ouch. Conclusion. For the foregoing reasons, plaintiffs respectfully request that the court enter an order denying Lively's motion for sanctions in its entirety and awarding sanctions sufficient to compensate the Wayfarer parties for the expense of responding to Lively's Rule 11 sanctions. Respectfully submitted, Mitchell Schuster, and, as I told you all last week, new lawyer on the team, Ellen Garofalo, who used to work at Venable, Taylor Swift's law firm. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 2 + 2 = 22, Ellen Garofalo. Also worth sharing, footnote number 4, at the court's request, plaintiffs will file documentation identifying costs incurred. So, how do you think the judge should rule on this? Let's discuss it all in the comments section.